Imagine stepping onto an airplane, exhausted but excited for a career-defining event, only to have the very pilot entrusted with your safe journey degrade you in front of others for something as personal as your accent. That's what happened to Dr. Marcus Kwame Jones, a brilliant tech entrepreneur and proud Ghanaian on a routine flight that would twist his fate and the pilots in ways neither could have anticipated. By the end of the day, one man would stand on stage at an investor summit, reshaping an industry, while the other's life would unravel before the eyes of those he least expected. This is that story. The morning light filtered through tall windows at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, illuminating the bustling crowds that were in a sense the lifeblood of countless journeys. Men and women, each with stories of their own, pulled suitcases, balanced briefcases and sipped coffee. Among them was Dr. Marcus Kwame Jones, a 35-year-old Ghanaian-American entrepreneur known within certain elite circles for his knack for transforming struggling tech startups into success stories. Most travelers passing him had no idea he'd just finalized a deal that could revolutionize airline logistics on a global scale. Marcus was not tall or imposing in stature, but there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. His rich brown skin and bright eyes reflected both pride in his African heritage and the unyielding spirit of one who had faced adversity many times before. He was on his way to a major event, an investor summit organized by Magnolia Air, a reputable airline known for its large presence across North America. The brand had begun an aggressive push into new markets, and part of that strategy involved leveraging cutting-edge tech solutions. Solutions Dr. Jones was pioneering. Though he traveled often, Marcus still retained the sense of wonder that came with every airport experience. The confluence of cultures, languages, and personalities fascinated him. Nothing captured the essence of modern life more than these swirling microcosms of humanity, where someone from Buenos Aires could cross paths with another from Tokyo, each bound for a different corner of the earth. Marcus had received an invitation months ago to speak at Magnolia Air's annual investor summit in Dallas. The summit promised an audience of top executives, potential venture capitalists, and seat holders on the airline's board. It wasn't just a standard speaking engagement. It was the place to debut his latest project, a next-generation analytics platform that promised to revolutionize how airlines managed their fleet schedules, fuel consumption, and passenger experience. For Dr. Jones, the day held unimaginable promise. If his presentation succeeded, it would usher in the next big stage of his career and potentially net Magnolia Air billions in cost savings. After checking in at the Magnolia Air counter, he made his way through security, politely answering the usual small talk about his accent whenever curious agents asked. It was a Ghanaian lilt that he had maintained proudly since his childhood. To him, it was a badge of honor, a piece of home he carried everywhere. He glanced at his phone, a calendar packed with final check-ins with his staff, a half-dozen emails needing answers, and a text from an old friend wishing him luck. A wave of positivity washed over him. Today was going to be a turning point, one way or another. Marcus arrived at the gate for Flight 459 to Dallas, a few minutes earlier than the boarding call. Despite the early hour, the waiting area was already brimming with travelers. Families off to visit relatives, business professionals prepping for next-day meetings, and tourists with cameras slung around their necks. He found a seat near a window with a view of the airplane. It bore Magnolia Air's signature logo, a sweeping magnolia blossom in white and soft grey, signifying growth and renewal. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his business partner, Lucia. "Knock it out of the park, boss," All eyes on you." He typed a quick thanks and assured her he had every intention of doing so. While scanning his emails, a voice boomed from a corner of the waiting area. "When are they going to start boarding this thing?" The man's tone was loud, impatient, tinged with the self-importance that only years of unchecked ego could cultivate. Marcus glanced up. There stood Captain Terence Manning, a tall, broad-shouldered pilot who seemed annoyed not by flight delays or scheduling mishaps, but by the presence of the routine crowds. He wore Magnolia Air's official pilot uniform, black slacks, a crisp white shirt with gold stripes on each shoulder, and a navy tie. His pilot's cap was tucked under his arm, and an overnight bag sagged from his other hand. Marcus hadn't seen a pilot waiting around the gate lounge with the rest of the passengers before. Typically they had separate quarters, or were ushered onto planes ahead of time. But as the morning's schedule was tight, perhaps Manning was simply waiting for instructions. The pilot was complaining to another uniformed individual, a flight attendant, presumably about the downtime. The attendant seemed intimidated, nodding quickly and offering apologies that it was still a few minutes until the scheduled boarding process began. From the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed Captain Manning's gaze flicker around the waiting area with a blend of impatience and mild contempt. What truly caught Marcus's attention was the subtext of annoyance whenever Manning's eyes landed on passengers speaking foreign languages. A pair of Spanish-speaking sisters giggled a row over. A large Jamaican family excitedly jabbered across from them. Each time the pilot's face warped into a faint grimace, as if offended that people dared speak languages other than English in his presence. Marcus felt an uncomfortable twinge in his chest. He had encountered that reaction before, dismissive stares when he visited rural areas or subtle digs at the slightest sign of an accent. The atmosphere around Captain Manning didn't seem welcoming. Still, for all the pilot's brashness, Marcus pushed the thought aside. Today was a big day, and there was no sense letting the negativity of a stranger invade his peace. Soon an announcement crackled overhead. "Now boarding Group 1 for Flight 459 to Dallas. We will begin with our first-class and priority boarding passengers. Please have your boarding passes and identification ready." Marcus gathered his carry-on and made his way to the priority boarding line thanks to his frequent flyer status. He was determined to remain composed and focus on the reason he was traveling. If all went well by the afternoon, he would be on stage with Magnolia Air's executives, showcasing the revolutionary system that was months in the making. He was anxious, of course, but also thrilled for the chance to prove himself yet again. Once on board, Marcus settled into his first-class seat 2A, right at the front on the left side of the aisle. He appreciated having enough space to pull out his laptop and make last-minute tweaks to his presentation deck. The cabin was clean and elegantly outfitted soft grey leather seats, overhead compartments trimmed with a subtle floral pattern reminiscent of the airline's Magnolia logo. Passengers trickled in. A friendly flight attendant offered Marcus a beverage, and he asked for water. As he sipped, he noticed Captain Manning still visible through the cockpit door that was momentarily open. The pilot was in heated conversation with someone else, gesturing pointedly, as if something about the plane's schedule or route was not told to his liking. Even from that distance, Marcus picked up that typical air of arrogance. The flight crew prepared for takeoff, announcing the usual safety instructions. Marcus put his phone on airplane mode, yet he still felt a small rush every time the engines powered up. Even after years of flying globally, he never lost his sense of awe at the miracle of flight. Once airborne and the seatbelt sign was turned off, the flight attendants began to serve beverages more systematically. Marcus opened his laptop to review slides. The synergy between flight path optimization and real-time data analytics was the crux of his presentation. He had spent months combing through datasets to develop an algorithm that cut fueling costs and time spent on the tarmac. Magnolia Air had expressed intense interest because, like any major airline, slashing operating costs could lead to major profit gains and a competitive edge. Suddenly, the curtain separating first class from business class was pulled aside. Captain Manning strode out, scanning the first-class seats. His gaze landed on Marcus, who was softly reading aloud to himself, testing out parts of his speech. Marcus's accent surfaced in certain words: parameters, logistics, innovations. The same accent he had grown up with in Ghana before his family moved to the United States. An audible scoff escaped Manning's lips as he approached. "Excuse me," he said, dripping with condescension. "But we do ask passengers to keep their voices down." Marcus blinked. He was speaking softly, so softly, in fact, that the flight attendant passing by gave him a confused look. Nonetheless, Marcus nodded politely and closed his mouth mid-sentence. "My apologies, Captain," he said. Captain Manning narrowed his eyes. "And please make sure you understand all announcements carefully," he added, alluding to Marcus's accent. "We have important instructions for your safety." Though the words themselves could be seen as standard caution, the pilot's tone was anything but. It vibrated with a disrespect that left Marcus stunned. With that, Manning pivoted and walked back toward the cockpit, leaving a disquieting energy in his wake. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. That had been no mere request for quiet. It was an insult delivered under the guise of procedure. He felt the old pang of anger he'd encountered many times in his life as a black immigrant with a pronounced accent. Then he reminded himself of his discipline, his self-control. He had worked too hard to let something like this derail his mindset. He forced a calm breath, mentally counting to 5, to maintain composure. The day was only just beginning. After Captain Manning returned to the cockpit, first class settled back into a semblance of peace. The flight attendants continued moving about, serving drinks, distributing snacks, and inquiring about passenger comfort. Yet Marcus noticed a shift. A handful of passengers had caught the exchange, their faces reflecting varying degrees of surprise or discomfort. One man across the aisle was a middle-aged executive type. He gave Marcus a sympathetic nod, as though offering an unspoken apology on behalf of the airline. Marcus tried to return to his presentation, but the moment lingered. He typed out notes on potential improvements for the Investor Summit speech, struggling to find the focus he'd had before. Every so often he replayed the pilot's words in his head. The tone, that scornful edge, was unsettling enough, but it was the reaction to Marcus's accent that truly cut deep. Like many immigrants or children of immigrants, Marcus had faced microaggressions in the past. But rarely did it come from someone in a professional capacity, and ironically someone tasked with ensuring a safe and respectful flight. Half an hour later, the seatbelt sign came on, and the aircraft encountered slight turbulence. The lead flight attendant, whose name tag read Jamie, hurried through the first-class cabin to ensure everything was stowed away. She paused near Marcus, noticing his furrowed brow and the idle slide on his laptop screen. She bent down slightly, voice lowered. "Sir." "I'm sorry about that," she said, hesitating as she searched for the right words. "The pilot's under a lot of stress today with operational changes." "It's no excuse, of course." Marcus offered a polite smile. "Thank you. I appreciate it," he said, softly. Jamie looked visibly relieved that Marcus didn't seem on the verge of lodging an official complaint. She added, "If there's anything I can do, please let me know." We want you to have a comfortable flight." "Thank you," he repeated, not wanting to dwell too much on the matter. He had bigger things to worry about, like the multi-million-dollar demonstration he was about to deliver. For the rest of the flight, Captain Manning did not reappear in the cabin. Marcus assumed the pilot was dealing with routine duties behind the locked cockpit door. Nonetheless, the tension remained. In the back of his mind, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the pilot's hostility was about more than just an accent. He remembered how Manning had glared at the Jamaican family in the waiting area. The pilot's microaggressions had likely marred many travelers' experiences without ever coming to light. Marcus tried to push the negativity aside. He put on his noise-cancelling headphones and focused on his final run-through, mouthing the words to his presentation. The flight wore on. Clouds drifted by outside sunlight, glancing off the plane's wing at intervals. Finally, a crackle from the overhead speaker announced their initial descent into Dallas. Marcus's mind accelerated to the tasks waiting for him on the ground: a rushed car ride to the convention center, a technical run-through, and then the main event. He was determined to let the morning's ugliness fuel him, not slow him down. Upon landing in Dallas, the plane taxied to the gate without incident. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had no desire to see Captain Manning again, but life had other plans. The moment the seatbelt sign clicked off, travelers leaped into action, collecting bags from overhead compartments, stepping into the aisle and jostling to disembark. Marcus grabbed his carry-on and was about to step into the aisle when he heard a sharp voice from behind. "Sir, you need to wait." Captain Manning barked loudly from the front of the plane. He had just emerged from the cockpit to bid passengers farewell, a standard courtesy of many pilots. But his eyes locked onto Marcus in a way that made him cringe. "We let the front rows go first." "Follow your instructions." "Okay." Marcus was in fact already in the front row, 2A, so he was abiding by standard deplaning procedure. Other first-class passengers looked puzzled by the pilot's admonishment, which seemed aimed specifically at Marcus rather than everyone in the section. A couple of them exchanged looks, seemingly uncertain whether to intervene or remain silent. "I am in the front," Marcus responded, measuring his voice carefully. "Row 2, right behind row 1. I'm following the procedure." Manning's face tightened. "Just so you're aware," he said. Glancing momentarily at Marcus's laptop bag, with suspicion, "We have strict carry-on guidelines too." It was as though the pilot was searching for any reason to criticize. Marcus instinctively tightened his grip on his bag, trying to keep calm. "Yes, I've complied with those guidelines," he said in a neutral tone. The hostility in Manning's posture was palpable. If it hadn't been so public, Marcus would have suspected something personal, some deeper vendetta. Instead, it was an open display of disrespect. A flight attendant behind Manning looked mortified, probably worried about how the situation could escalate into an official complaint, or worse, a viral social media post. At this point, a smartly dressed older woman from row 1, who had paused to let others exit, took a step forward. "Everything okay here?" she asked gently, looking from the pilot to Marcus. Manning's jaw clenched, but he forced a plastic smile. "All good, ma'am. Just reminding passengers of our protocols." Marcus offered a tight smile in return, not wanting a shouting match. "Thank you, Captain," he said quietly. Then addressing the older woman, he added, "I believe you're first in line." She nodded, and as she passed by, her eyes lingered on Marcus with a mixture of apology and concern. With that, the line moved. Marcus stepped off the plane without further confrontation, though a knot remained in his chest. Outside the jet bridge, the humidity of Dallas greeted him. He walked briskly toward baggage claim, anxious to put some distance between himself and Captain Manning. Behind him he could hear footsteps. Other passengers, possibly the same man, from the first-class cabin who had seemed sympathetic. Marcus didn't look back. He wanted to focus on the day's upcoming opportunities instead of letting the pilot's negativity overshadow them. After collecting his suitcase at the carousel, Marcus found a car waiting outside, arranged by Magnolia Air's hospitality department, to chauffeur him directly to the convention center. He exhaled, feeling a surge of comfort at the professional courtesy. The day had started off on a sour note, but he wouldn't let that define his entire trip. He had a speech to deliver, an audience to impress, and a contract that could reshape the airline industry. As the driver navigated out of the airport, Marcus's phone buzzed. A short message from an unknown Magnolia Air staff contact. "Looking forward to your presentation. We've got a top-tier crowd today. Good luck." He forced a smile, reminding himself that Captain Manning's rude behavior was an isolated incident, or so he hoped. Unbeknownst to Marcus, events were in motion behind the scenes that would bring him face to face with Captain Manning again far sooner than he anticipated. In a bitter twist of fate, the pilot wasn't done crossing paths with the man whose accent he had mocked. Before the day was done, they would find themselves in the same room, surrounded by some of the most influential power brokers in the airline industry, and the consequences would reverberate well beyond that day's final flight. The drive from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport to the Magnolia Air Convention Center took just under half an hour. The skyline of Dallas loomed ahead, glass and steel towers shimmering under the Texas sun. Marcus couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come from a small neighborhood in Accra, Ghana, to the beating heart of American commerce, about to pitch an idea to a room full of millionaires and corporate executives. He'd visited Dallas before, but only in passing. This trip was different. Banners of Magnolia. Air's Investor Summit draped the convention center's facade, featuring stylized silhouettes of jets soaring against pastel skies, accompanied by bold text, "Magnolia Air Innovation for the Next Decade." Taxis, limousines, and sleek black sedans lined the drop-off area, each discharging well-dressed professionals who looked ready to strike deals. Marcus felt a mix of nerves and excitement as the driver pulled up at the entrance. A Magnolia Air event coordinator named Bria greeted him with a warm smile. She wore a navy blue blazer with a small magnolia pin on her lapel and carried a clipboard that seemed to guide her every move. "Dr. Jones, welcome." "It's a pleasure to have you here," she said, leading him through the main doors. Inside the center bustled with energy. Booths displaying flight simulation demos, interactive data analytics exhibits, and marketing showcases lined the wide halls. Caterers milled about with trays of hors d'oeuvres, offering everything from mini tacos to fruit skewers. Bria guided Marcus to a VIP lounge area. "We have a schedule for you, but first you might want to get settled. We've prepared a private suite for your final preparations. Also, the CEO, Margaret Chen, would love a brief word with you if time permits." Marcus nodded, feeling the adrenaline kick in again. CEO Margaret Chen was a formidable figure in the airline world, a woman who had climbed the ranks through sheer force of will and vision. A meeting with her before the presentation was a rare privilege. The private suite was a tastefully decorated room, with plush seating, a mirror for final wardrobe checks, and a small desk. Marcus placed his laptop and notes down, then turned to Bria. "Thank you so much. Could you let Miss Chen know I'm available whenever she is?" Bria nodded and stepped out, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts for a moment. He checked the time, 2 hours until he went on stage. He quickly opened his laptop, flipping through his slides to make sure everything was in order. Bullet points on cost savings diagrams, on route efficiency, a compelling argument for how Magnolia Air could reduce delays and attract more customers. Everything looked sharp, yet the memory of Captain Manning's sneering voice intruded on his focus. Marcus closed his eyes momentarily, took a calming breath, and reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about one pilot's bias. It was about forging a future for airlines worldwide, a future in which a tech-driven approach could make flying more accessible and convenient for everyone. "Focus, Marcus," he whispered. "Today is too important." And with that, he rolled his shoulders as if physically shaking off the negativity. There was work to be done, and he intended to shine. The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. Marcus completed a quick sound check in the main auditorium, tested the projector settings, and confirmed that the stage lighting was adequate for his presentation's visuals. White chairs were arranged in rows facing a grand stage, complete with Magnolia Air's insignia projected onto an enormous backdrop screen. Then, just before he was due to return to his private suite, Bria reappeared, her expression mildly frazzled. "Dr. Jones. Ms. Chen's schedule shifted, so she'd like to see you now if possible," she said. Gesturing down the hall, Marcus grabbed his laptop and followed her through a winding corridor that led to a restricted area featuring several conference rooms. Magnolia Air's logo was embossed on frosted glass doors. They passed a few staff members in suits, each hustling from meeting to meeting. The air buzzed with corporate urgency. Finally, they arrived at a room labeled Executive Boardroom. Bria knocked softly, and a polished, confident voice from inside said, "Come in." Marcus stepped inside, ready to greet Margaret Chen. But the moment he crossed the threshold, his posture stiffened. Sitting at the large wooden table, apparently in mid-discussion with Ms. Chen, was Captain Terence Manning, the same pilot who had taunted Marcus on the flight. Ms. Chen, a petite woman with short cropped hair and an aura of command, rose to greet him. "Dr. Jones. So glad you could make time. This is Captain Terence Manning, one of Magnolia Air's senior pilots. He's on a rotational assignment and has been providing us crucial feedback on operational matters." Manning turned, and for a split second, his face was awash in shock. Then he composed himself, though a glimmer of recognition burned in his eyes. Marcus felt the blood rush to his cheeks. He was torn between anger and the necessity of maintaining a professional demeanor. "Pleasure to meet you, Marcus," said, forcing a polite tone, though it took genuine effort to keep his voice even. Captain Manning hesitated, an uneasy look flickering across his features. But Ms. Chen was watching, so he extended a hand. "Likewise," he said. The handshake was brief and stiff, an awkward clash of forced courtesy. Ms. Chen continued oblivious to the subtext. "Captain Manning has been spearheading some of our pilot retention initiatives and is here to observe the new technologies that we might integrate into our fleet. He'll also share insights on the day-to-day usability for flight crews." Marcus nodded, finding it hard to speak. The air felt hot, suffocating. Yet he sensed the advantage might be in his favor. The pilot had no idea that the passenger with the accent was also a major consultant and potential partner for the airline. Manning cleared his throat. "I've heard about Dr. Jones's upcoming presentation. It's about data analytics and route optimization. Correct?" He was trying to sound casual, but the tension underlying his words was unmistakable. Marcus forced a small smile. "Yes, I'm scheduled to present in about an hour. It's something I've been refining for quite a while. Ms. Chen beamed. We're all very excited. Dr. Jones, I've followed your work since your team collaborated with Nova Flight last year. Their operational costs dropped impressively after implementing your systems. Marcus thanked her, grateful for the shift in conversation. The mention of Nova Flight gave him a moment to reorient, reminding him of his proven track record. He was no newbie. He'd earned his reputation through results. Anyway, Ms. Chen concluded. I'll let you finish your final preparations, Dr. Jones. Captain Manning. Please feel free to coordinate with my assistant if you want to attend the talk. We'll have seats reserved for the flight ops team. Manning offered a tight-lipped smile. Of course, Miss Chen. I'm looking forward to it. Within minutes, Marcus was excused from the room, leaving Ms. Chen and Manning to continue their conversation. His pulse pounded as he walked down the corridor, overshadowed by a swirl of thoughts. The irony was almost comedic. His own antagonist was not only part of the same airline, but evidently had some influence. Yet if the pilot had mocked Marcus on the plane, he was now in for a rude awakening. In less than an hour, Dr. Jones would take the stage, commanding the attention of Magnolia Air's top brass and unveiling the future of their operations. A strong part of Marcus savored the poetic justice. Still, he wasn't entirely sure how the pilot might react, and the last thing he needed was additional stress in the minutes leading up to a crucial presentation. Retreating to his private suite, Marcus found it nearly impossible to concentrate solely on his slides. The pilot's sneer, the dismissive tone, it all replayed in his mind like a stuck record. He had dealt with prejudice before, but rarely did it appear so brazenly, nor in such a place of professional consequence. He took a seat on the plush couch laptop balanced on his knees and tried to channel the tension into focus. A few minutes later, Bria knocked and poked her head in. "Everything okay, Dr. Jones?" she asked, voice tinged with concern. Marcus exhaled slowly. "All good. Just a bit of stage nerves," he lied. He didn't want to drag her or anyone else into the personal friction with Manning. Bria nodded sympathetically. "I get that. But you've got 10 minutes until you're on. Let me know if you need anything else." "Thank you. I'll be out soon." Alone again, Marcus stood, walked to a small mirror, and did a quick mental pep talk. "You've prepared for this," he told his reflection. "You've already proven yourself to bigger audiences." His reflection stared back, steeled by the logic. He was not some underqualified rookie. He was a seasoned entrepreneur with results to show. No pilot's petty scorn could diminish that. He recalled the first time he presented a concept in front of a major airline. He was a junior consultant, then filled with ambition, but also fear. Yet he delivered, and that success had paved the way for more. Today would be no different. With that thought, he closed the laptop, straightened his tie, and exited the suite. The auditorium was buzzing with conversation as staff members scurried to seat the VIPs. A few of Magnolia Air's board members were there, recognizable by their name badges and the way people parted to greet them. Marcus waited in the wings as Bria introduced him to the event's MC, who gave him a quick rundown of the speaking sequence. Marcus would be the third speaker, the highlight before the break, for a networking lunch. The seats at the front were reserved for the airline's executive team and its senior pilots, Captain Manning among them. Moments later, the MC took the stage, warming up the crowd. Marcus peeked out from behind the curtain, scanning the audience. It was a large gathering, well over 200 people. He spotted Ms. Chen near the center in a prime seat. Manning was a few chairs down, his face unreadable. Marcus quickly withdrew so as not to be seen. Adrenaline coursed through him, but he channeled it into readiness. Ladies and gentlemen, next we have someone who is truly transforming the way we think about airline operations, the MC announced. His groundbreaking work has already saved carriers millions of dollars in operational costs. Please welcome Dr. Marcus Kwame Jones. A wave of applause erupted. Marcus emerged from the side, stepping confidently up to the podium. The bright lights partially obscured his view of the audience, which helped calm the nerves. He began with a brief personal introduction, sharing how his roots in Ghana and love for aviation led him to pursue data-driven solutions for real-world problems in the airline industry. As a child, I watched planes take off from Kotoka International Airport in Accra. He said, voice, steady accent, proud and clear. I dreamt of the day I might be part of an innovation that keeps those birds in the sky safely and efficiently. His opening resonated. The applause was warm. Even though he couldn't see individual faces beyond the first row, the crowd's energy felt supportive. Over the next 15 minutes, Marcus deftly navigated through slides, charts, and carefully curated data. He explained how predictive analytics could manage everything from fuel consumption to baggage routing, reducing flight delays and saving carriers up to 12% in annual overhead. He referenced a real success story, Nova Flight, where the technology had cut on-ground turnaround times by nearly 15%. Each statistic prompted eager note-taking from the crowd. The concept of real-time data streams enthralled them, especially as he showed them a live simulation featuring a sample route with immediate rerouting suggestions in response to weather changes. Finally, he unveiled a new expansion plan for Magnolia Air, projected with color-coded maps and financial forecasts. By adopting his system, Magnolia Air could potentially outpace competitors in both cost efficiency and passenger satisfaction. Applause rippled through the hall when he concluded. Ms. Chen, beaming, led a standing ovation from the front row. Marcus stood at the podium, heart pounding, and gave a humble bow. This was what he had spent months preparing for. As the applause subsided, a handful of people started queuing up near the side of the stage for Q&A. He braced himself, ready to answer. A senior executive from Magnolia Air's finance department stepped up first. She asked a series of pointed yet enthusiastic questions about implementation costs and time frame. Marcus answered each in calm, thorough detail, referencing past rollouts and the typical ROI cycle. She nodded impressed and thanked him. Next came a middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform, but not Manning. He introduced himself as Captain Dustin Hill from Magnolia's Chicago hub. His questions focused on how user-friendly the system was for cockpit crews already juggling multiple tasks. Marcus eased his concerns, illustrating how the analytics platform integrated seamlessly with existing cockpit display systems to avoid overloading pilots with extraneous data. Then from the second row, Captain Terence Manning rose. He didn't bother to use the microphone stand set up for questions, which forced everyone to twist around in their seats. The MC attempted to guide him to the mic, but Manning waved him off. He cleared his throat loud enough to echo through the silent auditorium. There's a lot of theoretical data here, Manning said. But how do we know it holds up in real-world scenarios? We've got enough complexities in the cockpit without adding more bells and whistles. And can Dr. Jones ensure that everyone involved really understands the instructions being given? Marcus recognized the jab, understands the instructions. A thinly veiled reference to the accent comment. The tension in the room became palpable as heads turned from the pilot to the stage. Maintaining professional composure, Marcus responded. Thank you for the question. Captain, Real-world validation is critical. Our platform has been trialed with multiple airlines, including Nova Flight with quantifiable successes. As for instructions, the system's interface is primarily visual and data-driven, minimizing linguistic misinterpretations. It's designed to be universal. Any pilot can understand the alerts and recommendations without confusion. Manning folded his arms, eyes narrow. Sure, but what if there are unforeseeable issues? Mid-flight communications breakdowns, for example. Pilots are trained to rely on standard procedures and checklists, many that have stood for decades. Why complicate that with another layer? Because the industry is evolving, Captain Marcus replied evenly. Passenger expectations. Global routes and economic pressures require more adaptive tools. Standard procedures still apply, but the data analytics platform augments the pilot's decision-making, offering real-time solutions instead of static guidelines. A hush fell over the audience. It was evident this wasn't just a casual Q&A. It was a personal challenge. Manning let out a small, derisive snort, glancing around as if gauging the reaction. Ms. Chen's brows knitted a flash of displeasure crossing her face. Sensing the confrontation might escalate, the MC cut in. "Thank you, Captain Manning. Those are valid concerns, and we appreciate Dr. Jones addressing them. We have time for a couple more questions." Manning didn't budge for a moment, seeming to consider pushing further. Then he turned on his heel and sat down, arms crossed. The room collectively exhaled. Marcus fielded one more question from an aviation journalist who asked about data security. He answered with clarity, explaining encryption protocols. The audience applauded once more, and the MC thanked Marcus for his enlightening presentation. As the lights dimmed and the stage cleared for the next segment, Ms. Chen walked up to Marcus, offering a firm handshake. "That was excellent, Dr. Jones," she said, her voice carrying sincere admiration. Then she added in a lower tone, "We'll talk about Captain Manning later. Please don't let that rattle you. His concerns aren't shared by the majority here." Marcus thanked her relief, mingling with a smoldering anger toward Manning. The pilot's attempt to undermine him in public had failed. The crowd's reaction proved that. And yet, deep within, Marcus sensed the pilot wasn't done trying to knock him down. As the audience dispersed for the networking lunch, clusters of attendees approached Marcus with business cards and congratulations. The hum of conversation mixed with clinking glasses and the aroma of catered food. Tech entrepreneurs, potential investors, and Magnolia Air staff all vied for a moment of his time. Even some of the flight operations personnel lined up to ask about test trials or possible integration in their respective departments. Through it all, Marcus maintained a polite, collected demeanor, grateful for the positive reception. But he couldn't entirely block out the memory of Captain Manning's antagonism. As if on cue, he spotted Manning slip out a side door, his face set in a grim scowl. Whether he was avoiding the crowd or heading somewhere else, Marcus didn't know. For a fleeting moment, Marcus felt the surge of anger return, but he quickly focused on the well-wishers around him, soaking in the success of his presentation. An hour later, the formal lunch concluded, and Ms. Chen took the stage once more to introduce the next segment, a panel discussion featuring airline CEOs and industry experts. Marcus was free until late afternoon, when a closed-door investor session would commence. He used the spare time to mingle further, forging connections that could bolster future deals. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Captain Manning was in a meeting with a handful of executives, including Ms. Chen. Though the details weren't public, word began to trickle out that the pilot's abrasive conduct had not gone unnoticed. A low murmur circulated among the staff. Something about a scuffle with ground crew prior to the flight. Another rumor about complaints from multiple passengers on Flight 459. No one had the full picture yet, but it seemed that some form of accountability was hovering on the horizon. In a twist of fate, as Marcus strolled toward one of the smaller exhibit halls, he overheard two Magnolia air staffers whispering animatedly in a corridor. "I heard the pilot's on thin ice," said the first, a woman in a marketing blazer. "He's got a track record of complaints." "No kidding," replied the second, a man, holding a stack of pamphlets. "Word is, Ms. Chen's tolerance for that type of behavior is zero. Something big might be coming down for him, especially after he disrupted the Q&A." Marcus didn't break stride, but a subtle sense of vindication flickered within him. He didn't wish ill on Manning, he simply wanted a safe, respectful workplace for everyone. Still, it was hard not to feel a certain grim satisfaction, knowing that the pilot who'd tried to belittle him might soon face consequences. Later in the afternoon, Marcus found himself seated at a long table in a boardroom with about a dozen key stakeholders. Among them was Miss Chen, along with CFOs, venture capitalists, and senior managers. This was the real deal, a deep dive discussion into the feasibility of implementing Marcus's platform across Magnolia Air's fleet. Questions flew back and forth about budget allocations, pilot training modules, IT infrastructure, and timelines. Marcus provided thorough, strategic answers. Diagrams and spreadsheets circulated, and after nearly 2 hours, Ms. Chen seemed satisfied. The final step would be a formal proposal, followed by a contract negotiation. As they wrapped up, Ms. Chen's assistant stepped into the boardroom, whispering something into her ear. Ms. Chen's expression darkened momentarily, and she nodded. Turning to the room, she apologized. "I need to step out briefly. Please continue. I'll return shortly." Marcus caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. Something was happening likely related to Captain Manning, he guessed. Although he was curious, he didn't pry. The meeting continued, and soon Marcus was fielding more questions from the CFO, confident that the data and proven pilot programs would speak for themselves. Outside, Ms. Chen walked briskly down the hallway, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She headed toward a private office where a small group including Captain Manning stood in tension. The door closed behind them, leaving the corridor silent. Inside that room, accountability had arrived, though none of them yet realized just how public the reckoning would become. The investor session wound down around 4 p.m., and Marcus emerged, adrenaline thrumming from what seemed a near certain success. The CFO had signaled that the board was highly inclined to adopt his proposal, pending final negotiations. A formal announcement might come as soon as next week. Smiling to himself, Marcus headed toward the main auditorium foyer, intending to grab a coffee and maybe a snack from the event's caterers. He barely made it halfway across the foyer before he noticed a commotion near a side entrance. A cluster of employees, some in flight uniforms and others in suits, had gathered. Phones were out, snapping pictures or filming something. At the center of the huddle stood Captain Manning, red-faced, engaged in a heated argument with a man in a brown uniform. The insignia indicated he was from ground operations. "You can't talk to me like that!" Manning shouted, his voice carrying across the foyer. "Do you know who I am?" The ground ops worker, though flustered, held his ground. "And you can't treat us like we're your servants. We have a schedule and protocol to follow. Everyone does." A few staff members tried to intervene, urging them to lower their voices. But it was too late. Several people were already filming. A brash statement from Manning. Something about low-level employees rang through the air, turning the onlookers' exasperation to horror. Phones angled for a better shot. Marcus watched from a distance, shock and a hint of disappointment coursing through him. This pilot was a walking disaster, seemingly unwilling to keep his prejudices or arrogance in check. If the rumors about disciplinary measures were true, Manning was digging himself an even deeper hole. Suddenly, Ms. Chen emerged from another corridor, flanked by 2 senior HR managers. Upon seeing the scene, her expression hardened. She pushed her way through the bystanders and confronted Manning directly. The pilot's rant died on his lips. Ms. Chen said something quietly, pointing toward the door. With a final glare, Manning stormed out, shoving past a small throng of staff. Ms. Chen then turned to the ground ops worker, apologizing profusely, while cameras still rolled. Within seconds, the footage hit social media channels, shared by employees, attendees, and the curious onlookers who had taken the videos. Word spread rapidly through the convention center. Whispers turned into open conversation. The pilot who had disrupted the Q&A was now publicly berating ground staff. Even Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues asking if he was okay, and if he'd heard the latest uproar. The day had started with excitement about new tech solutions, but was ending with a scandal that threatened to overshadow the entire summit. Karma, it seemed, had arrived with a vengeance for Captain Terence Manning, and it wasn't done with him yet. Marcus slipped away from the crowd, not wanting to be drawn into the meltdown swirling around Manning. He found a quieter corridor and leaned against a wall, letting out a long breath. It was still only mid-afternoon, but it felt like he'd lived through an entire drama. Bria found him there, looking just as shaken. "Did you see that she whispered, glancing back toward the foyer?" Marcus nodded. "Hard to miss. Is Ms. Chen handling it?" Bria nodded. "HR's on it. But from what I heard, Manning's meltdown was the final straw. Ms. Chen is furious about both the Q&A incident and now this altercation. A formal investigation might lead to his suspension or even termination." Marcus felt a complicated wave of relief and empathy. On one hand, he believed in accountability. On the other, he recognized that a person losing their job, even if their behavior warranted consequences, was no small thing. He had no intention of celebrating another's downfall, but it was difficult to ignore the sense of poetic justice at play. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Lucia, his business partner, calling. He stepped into an empty meeting room for privacy. The moment he answered, Lucia's excited voice crackled on the line. "I've been watching the live streams and reading updates online," she exclaimed. "Your presentation was phenomenal." "Congrats." "Thanks, Lucia," he replied, smiling in spite of the turmoil. "It went well. The board seems interested. What's this about a pilot meltdown?" Marcus sighed and recounted the broad strokes of the day, from the flight incident to the confrontation in the foyer. Lucia was aghast. "That's insane." "Well, I'm just glad you're okay. I know you can handle yourself, but that's a ridiculous level of unprofessionalism." "It is," Marcus agreed. "But it's out of my hands now. The airline's leadership is dealing with it. My focus is making sure the contract negotiations go smoothly." "Right. Keep your eyes on the prize," she said. "Anyway, I just wanted to call and celebrate your success." "You did it, Marcus." They ended the call, and for a moment, Marcus stood in that silent room, the day's events reeling through his mind. Indeed, he had done what he came to do: deliver a groundbreaking presentation, secure the interest of one of the biggest airline players in North America, and push his vision for the future of aviation technology. Yet overshadowing it all was the realization that prejudice still lurked in corners of every industry. Captain Manning's meltdown wasn't just about one man's arrogance. It signaled the broader challenges that many professionals of color, especially immigrants with distinct accents, continued to face. As successful as Marcus was, he wasn't immune, and that reality stung even if he had come out on top this time. Returning to the convention floor, Marcus resolved to make the most of the summit's final hours. There were still meetings to hold, deals to discuss, and new relationships to foster. Captain Manning's drama would not derail what had taken months of dedicated work to achieve. Late in the day, as the summit's final panel concluded, Chen sent word requesting to see Marcus one more time. He found her in a smaller conference room, her posture tense. The blinds were drawn, and the soft hum of air conditioning provided the only background noise. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Jones," she said, offering a seat. "I'd like to extend my personal apology on behalf of Magnolia Air for the behavior you've witnessed from Captain Manning." Marcus settled into the chair across from her. "I appreciate that, Ms. Chen. It was unexpected, to say the least." She nodded her eyes, reflecting clear frustration. He's been with the company for nearly a decade, but there have been a series of complaints this past year, incidents that pointed to unprofessional conduct. Today was the tipping point. Effective immediately, he's been placed on administrative leave pending a formal disciplinary review. I'm also aware of the tension he caused during your flight and the Q&A. A mixture of relief and sorrow washed over Marcus. "I'm sorry it came to this. He seems like a man under a lot of strain, but there's no excuse for his actions." Ms. Chen sighed. "That's exactly it. Stress can't excuse prejudice or aggression. We strive for an inclusive environment at Magnolia Air. I'm not going to allow one individual to undermine that, no matter his rank." Marcus admired her resolve. "Thank you. It means a lot to see leadership taking a strong stance." She offered a thin smile. "Well, I also wanted to assure you that our interest in your platform is still as strong as ever. In fact, I'm confident we'll finalize this deal soon. Let today's fiasco serve as proof that we need better accountability across all levels, including analytics that might flag consistent trouble spots." They chatted briefly about next steps, legal teams' contract details, pilot training and rollout schedules. The conversation ended on a note of positivity, marred only by the shadow of Manning's meltdown. Ms. Chen's handshake was firm, her appreciation genuine. Before Marcus left the room, Ms. Chen added, "There is one more thing. We're planning a formal press release to announce our partnership with your firm. But given today's unfortunate publicity, we'd also like to address the pilot incident. Make it clear that we won't tolerate discrimination. We may ask for a statement from you if you're comfortable." Marcus paused. A statement? He thought of all the times he had chosen silence rather than confrontation. Now the spotlight was here. "I'll consider it," he said. "But for now, let me focus on the positive strides we're making. That's why I'm here." Ms. Chen nodded in understanding. With that, Marcus stepped out, heading back to the now half-empty convention center hall. The day had been a crucible of tension triumph and karmic rebalancing. And though he couldn't say it was a pleasant experience, it was certainly a memorable one. As the summit wound down, Marcus found a quiet corner in the lobby, emotionally drained but proud. He wasn't drawn to the hotel mixer across the street. He craved stillness after the turbulence of the day. Scrolling through his phone, he saw social media already ablaze with footage of Captain Manning's outburst. Comments poured in, calling for justice and praising Magnolia Air's swift response. Though many congratulated Marcus for his presentation, just as many referenced the scandal. He replied sparingly, choosing to let leadership handle the fallout. Bria soon approached with a glass of iced water. "You've had quite a day," she said, softly offering him a warm smile. "I appreciate you checking in," Marcus replied. "You handled it with grace." People noticed she added before, whispering with a grin. "And no worries, Captain Manning won't be flying your return trip." Marcus chuckled lightly, the tension finally easing. As Bria left, he sank back in his seat. Despite the challenges, he had achieved what he came for, and the man who mocked his accent had been exposed before the world. In the end, Marcus hadn't just endured the storm. He'd flown through it and landed with dignity. The next morning, Marcus returned to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, feeling lighter despite the previous day's turmoil. He moved through check-in and security. With ease, his thoughts focused on the opportunities ahead. The tension with Captain Manning had shifted into the past, and a promising contract with Magnolia Air now felt within reach. At the lounge, he gazed out the window, watching planes taxi and take off. A few Magnolia staffers passed by and offered kind words about his presentation and quiet apologies for the incident. Marcus thanked them, appreciating the sincere gestures. When his flight was called, he boarded with a quiet confidence. This time, the pilot was a warm, smiling woman, chatting with the crew, not a trace of Manning in sight. Settling into his first-class seat, Marcus exhaled. As the plane climbed, he stared out at the shrinking Texas landscape and allowed himself a rare moment of rest. No confrontation, no scandal, just sky silence and the satisfaction of knowing he'd weathered the storm with composure. He smiled as a flight attendant offered water. "Just water, thanks," he replied. With the hum of the engines in his ears, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come from a boy in Ghana dreaming of airplanes to a man helping reshape how they flew. Prejudice had tried to cloud his path, but he'd risen above it. And now he was flying home, not just to Atlanta, but toward a future he'd built on purpose, grace, and undeniable merit. From a contentious flight to a triumphant stage appearance, Marcus Kwame Jones's journey underscores that perseverance and professionalism can outshine even the darkest clouds of prejudice. When we stand firm in our principles, celebrating our unique origins, maintaining composure under fire, and staying focused on our goals, we pave the way for monumental success and overdue accountability. If this story moved you, taught you something valuable, or simply kept you on the edge of your seat, we invite you to become part of our community. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel so we can continue bringing you stories that echo real-life challenges and triumphs. Your support helps spotlight voices that champion respect, innovation, and equality in every corner of our world. Thank you for tuning in, and here's to embracing our common humanity as we reach for the skies together.